So now we'll switch over to the University of Florida with Dr. Philipe Moriel. Philipe Moriel is an associate professor with the University of Florida in the ONA station, and he's going to be talking a little bit about the interaction between nutrition and fertility. And Philipe Moriel is probably one of the leading scientists studying the interaction between nutrition and fertility, but not only that, also with a big emphasis on fetal programming, which is really good for us in the Southeast because historically a lot of that data was generated in the Midwest. So we've been learning a lot since Philippe started in ONA. So with that, Philippe, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Pedro, for the introduction. I'll try to put us back on track. Okay, I'm going to speak a little bit faster, but still covering the major points. So this presentation here, what I did, I divided in 3 parts. The first one, The first one, I'm just going to go over the overview of what happens, what you should expect in terms of count response and calf response when you provide some kind of pre-calving supplementation. Okay? And then after that, I'm going to show you that some fine adjustments to that strategy can have a significant impact on calf performance, either increasing or decreasing the performance of the offspring. All right? And at the end, I'm going to show you some of the preliminary data that we have with heat stress during gestation. Okay, you guys are going to hear a lot more about the effects of heat stress tomorrow on pregnancy rates. Dr. P. Hansen is going to give that presentation. Today, I'm just going to focus on what happens of heat stress during gestation and what it leads to the offspring performance, right? Their heifers. Okay, that's so that you guys keep those thoughts in your mind. Those are still ongoing studies, but we already have some pretty nice data to share. Now, a lot of the things that I'm going to talk tonight, this morning, is included in this review that we did a couple of years ago. Right? It's free. You guys can have access to that. There's a lot more details, and I cover a lot more strategies than I will be able to cover this morning. Okay? At this point, all of you probably heard about this term fetal programming. Okay? It has received a lot of attention in beef cattle for the last 15 years. Right? A lot of the studies started back in the Midwest, and then it started spreading all over the country. Okay? And this is the idea or the concept that by changing the nutrition during pregnancy, you can actually change how that calf will develop. Right? You can change how the organs are being developed, gene expression, and so on. Right? To the point that you affect birth weights, weaning weights, carcass quality, right? And even reproduction of the heifer offspring. Now, for several years, especially at the beginning, right, a lot of people focus mostly on the late gestation period. And the reason is because this is the calf growth during pregnancy, okay, the red line. 66% of that calf growth happened during the last 3 months of gestation. So for that, people put a lot of effort. So you're going to find a lot more studies with pre-calving supplementation during the last 3 months than any time before that. Right? But we now know that this is not the most important one. In fact, all of them are. Now, even though the requirements for pregnancy during the first 2 trimesters here, it's almost 0 or very small, you still have a lot of organs being developed. Right, so for example, the first 3 months of gestation, you have the pancreas, the liver, the brains, the ovaries, testicles being formed. Now, as you advance during pregnancy, other tissues are being developed. Right? So every tissue has a different time or different window that is going to develop. Right, so for example, for muscle and adipose tissue, which is really important for those people producing calves, right? Carcass quality, heavyweights. They also form different times. So for example, adipose tissue is formed during the last 3 months of gestation. And that what will drive marbling scores, for example. Whereas muscle tissue, you're forming during mid-gestation and late gestation. And there's something very unique about muscle growth in those animals that it can grow in two ways. First, during mid-gestation, you actually increase the number of fibers. Right? After that, it increases the muscle mass by increasing just the size of each of those fibers. Once the calf is born, the number of muscle fibers are set, meaning that if you have a nutrient restriction during gestation to the point that it decreases the number of muscle fibers, after birth, he might never had a chance to compensate. Okay? Even if you make larger muscle fibers. And that is the main reason why when you guys go through the literature, you're going to have a lot of inconsistency on what happens to the calf performance. Because it pretty much depends on how much she was restricted during gestation. So the major point that I wanted you to remember for these 2 last slides was each tissue has a different timeline of development, meaning that if a restriction happens at the beginning, middle, or late gestation, consequences to the calf is going to be different. And also, they have different priorities. So muscle and adipose tissue has the lowest priority for nutrients when the fetus is developing. So anytime you're going through restriction, the first two tissues of that calf that will be affected are those. Right? It doesn't matter if it's spring calving or fall calving, that's what happens. Now, the first part I'm going to show is this. Since I came back to Florida, I was 2 years in North Carolina in the Waynesville area as assistant professor in NC State. Then I moved back to Florida in 2016. So since I came back to Florida, we start focusing a lot on those fetal programming studies. Right? And then from 2017 to 22, we did 6 studies, all of them simultaneous for several years, each one of them. And then what I did, I just summarized all of that study to look at what happens when I supplement those cows, having a really large number of cows. Right? So end up having almost 1,200 cows, all Brangus, fall calving herd, on warm season grasses, right, grazing Bahia grass. And then the studies all beginning around 90 days before calving. Right? And then some of those cows received or not supplementation. Right? So for example, we did several analyses, right? We look at the impact of body condition score at the time of calving, at the time of breeding, at the time of weaning, and you guys can find that information in this article here too. But today I'm just going to focus about the fetal programming part. Right? We know that they have to calve in good body condition score, right? But for them to calve in good body condition score, you have to treat her a lot sooner than that, right? Probably, and the best time to do is right after weaning. When you're working calves, there's a chance to sort them into those that are in good body condition score, those that are not. And then you design a supplementation program specific to each of those groups. All right, so that's what we did in our analysis. We separated first body condition score at the time of weaning. Were they above or were they below 5? And then within each group, I sorted them into those that received supplementation or those that did not. Right? The supplements were provided for an average of 70 days before calving, around 2.5 pounds per cow per day. And then the type of supplement was either DDG, distillers grains, range cubes, molasses with urea, bakery waste, all kinds of supplements that we used. Right? But on average, about 2.5 pounds per cow per day, which is a very small amount of supplementation. Now, what should you expect in terms of body condition score? Well, first of all, because we are a fall calving herd, you guys can see that at the time of weaning, most of our cows have good body condition score, right? They are above 5. But you still have a good number of those cows that are thin at this time, right? Now, what happens when you don't supplement those cows that are thin, right? They begin at the time of weaning, they are around 4.5. If you don't supplement, they pretty much have the same body condition score. But what actually happened here was the first 35 days, they gain body condition. That happens with most of the cows. Right after weaning, their requirements are the lowest. They will gain a lot of condition on grass. But after that, they're going to lose as they approach calving. So a lot of times you don't realize it, but it did happen, some body condition score loss in this group. And I'm going to show you in a minute. Now, if you supplement, those cows are going to gain about 0.60% of 2/3 of a unit, right, in terms of body condition score. So a small amount of supplementation will help them a lot and make sure that they will calve in good body condition score, everybody above 5. Now, if they are in good condition, right, close to a 6, and you don't supplement, those cows will lose. And you should expect around 0.5 point of decrease in their body condition score if you don't do anything and they're looking good at the time of weaning. Okay? Now, if you do supplement, now you have a very small amount of increase in body condition score as you would expect, right? She's heavier, she has more body condition score, her requirements are greater. She's not going to gain as much as the other group that is thinner, right? And then, so at the time of calving, these are the differences that we have in their body condition score. But at the start of breeding season, they are pretty much the same, right? The same difference you found at calving continues all the way to the start of breeding season. Now what happened to their pregnancy rates? So when we look at their pregnancy rates to this final pregnancy rates of this study, all those cows were natural breeding. Okay, none of them were synchronized OAI. You can see that those cows that were thin at the time of weaning and they received about 70 days, they have an increase in their pregnancy rate, substantial amount. And that's more than enough to pay for the cost of the supplementation. Now, if they were in good condition at the time of weaning and you did supplement, nothing happened, right? Which is what you would expect. So unfortunately, for several years, people decided that they made this decision about supplementing or not just based on how the cow performed. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, I'm going to show you that we have to start thinking like that and think about the pair. Right? So because when we actually look at the weaning weights of those calves, right, if they were born from cows that were thin at the time of weaning, and they were born from cows that received supplementation, there's no differences in their weaning weights. It improved the pregnancy rates of the mother, but had no benefit to the calf. But when you look at the calves born from cows that were in good condition, when you provide a supplementation during the late gestation, they increased by 20 pounds, which again is more than enough to pay for the cost of supplementation. So here we are in a win-win situation, right? So that you could supplement everybody, because if it doesn't increase the pregnancy rates of her, you will at least have some benefit to the calf. Right? And these are, like I said, several years, several counts. That counts for a lot of variability, year variation. So it's a pretty good response. All right, so we should all consider doing something like that, whether you're in a spring calving or fall calving herd. Something else that we saw is that even if you, regardless of body condition score of the cow, if she did receive supplementation, they start calving a lot sooner. Right? So if that's something that you need to do in your operation, this is a very good and feasible strategy to do it and bring more cows at the beginning without having to synchronize. Right? Now, hopefully everybody here has an idea, they're excited to do that. Right? It helps with reproduction, helps with the calf. Now I'm going to show you that some fine changes to that supplementation strategy can actually be increase or decrease whatever we're doing. All right? So we have a lot of things that we could talk about is the amount of restriction, the type of diet, the type of minerals, the type of fatty acids, for example. But I'm going to focus only on the timing, frequency, okay, and some feed additives that we used recently. So the first one was timing. Doesn't matter when I start, doesn't matter for how long I do it. Right? So this study here was very simple. We had 3 groups of cows. One of them did not receive supplementation during the pre-calving period. Right? This is the blue group here. And also another group that received around 2 pounds of distillers grains for 84 days before calving. Every day for 84 days. And then you also have the group that instead of providing 2 pounds for 80 days, what I did, I doubled the amount of supplement, 4 pounds per cow per day, but I cut the supplementation length by half. So the total amount of supplementation is exactly the same for those cows. The only difference is if I spread it throughout the whole late gestation or if I concentrate it at the beginning. And the hypothesis here was that if I concentrate all this feed right here, right during this time of her life, when their requirements are the lowest, right, I would put more body condition score in those cows with the same amount of a supplement that I invested. And at the same time, I'm also cutting labor by half. Right? But however, what's going to be the impact on the calf? So in terms of body condition score, those cows, they all start in good body condition. Now, though that group that did not receive supplementation, look what happened during the first 5 days, like I told you. They all gain. There's a good amount of grass, right? Plenty of grass at that time of the year, and the requirements are met by that grass. But it rapidly changes as they approach pregnancy. And those cows that did not receive supplementation, they start losing. Right? And so a lot of times people don't even notice that loss in body condition score. Now when I supplemented, of course all of them gain more body condition score, but we did not see any differences at the time of calving if I supplement them for 84 days or if I cut that supplementation in half. So those cows, those mature cows, as you guys are going to see in this study and later, they're very efficient. You can do a lot of things to them and they respond exactly the same. Right? Now when we look at pregnancy rates, we didn't see any effects in this study. And the major reason is right here. Right? The control group, even though they lost body condition score, they still calved above 5, body condition score 5, and they did not lose more than half of a point in their breeding season. So technically, they didn't need that supplementation. They did very well. So which treatment here would you pick? Probably the one you didn't supplement, right? Why would you spend the money if they didn't increase the pregnancy rates? Now, when we start looking at the calf performance, starting at 3 months of age, we see differences in how they start growing. And at the time of weaning, those calves that were born from cows that received supplementation, they are heavier, but the best results were from calves born from cows that were supplemented for the whole time. Seems for the calf, it's better to have a longer period of supplementation to maximize their weaning weights. It was almost 30 pounds more by doing that, compared to 13 if you just try to cut labor in half. Right, so by cutting labor in half in that scenario that we did, it would cost $7 less per cow. But I'm sacrificing 30 pounds of additional weaning weight. So sometimes the decisions that we made just by thinking about the cow can really leave a lot of money on the table. Right? Now, we send those calves to the feedlot, and we look how their immune response happened to vaccination and feedlot entry. And what we see is that calves born from cows that receive supplementation, they tend to have stronger immune responses. More calves responded to the vaccine, greater antibody production. And the best results were for calves born from cows that were supplemented for only half of that time. And same pattern happened with the carcass quality. If they were born from cows that were supplemented, they had better carcass quality. And the best results were if they were born from cows that were supplemented only half of that time. So if you remember all the data I just showed you, is that for a cow, the best treatment was not supplementing. For the weaning weights was supplementing the whole time. For carcass weights was supplementing half of that time. Right? That's great, right? Because it gives you a lot of flexibility. So if you retain ownership and you want to increase carcass quality, that's a strategy that you should try to do. If you're selling calves at the time of weaning, you just want to maximize weaning weights, do it longer. It seems that it benefits the calf better, right, than trying to cut a little bit of labor. All right? Now, having said that, I know how painful it is to supplement those cows every day for a long periods of time. And in Florida, a lot of producers will not do that. It doesn't matter how well the results are. So then we start doing these studies here with frequency of supplementation. Is there something that I can do within each week to help a producer? And the idea is very simple, right? So for example, here we have 4 groups 80 days before they calve. One group did not receive any supplementation, and another one received 2 pounds of distillers every single day. So that's 14 pounds of distillers in a week. And then we added 2 more groups where they had the same weekly amount, those 14 pounds, but now they're divided in 3 days. So 4.5 on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Right? Or they were provided once a week. Every Monday, each cow got 14 pounds of supplement, which, by the way, they ate in 30 minutes. Right? And now they had to wait a whole week to get another supplementation on that. Okay? But the idea here, I'm really going to push them. Like, let's see. The idea was, how low can I get before I start hurting the performance of the mother and the calf? Now, when you look at body condition score, everybody's starting good condition, around 5.5. Look at the time of calving. Those that did not receive supplementation, they lost, right? Significant amount of body condition score in this case. Everybody calving below 5. But look at how they responded with frequency. If I supplement it, doesn't matter if it was daily, 3 times a week, or once a week, they responded exactly the same. And those differences maintained all the way into the beginning of the breeding season. So cows, like I said, they are extremely efficient, those mature cows. You can do once a week, longer, they will respond. Now, when I look at the calf performance, this is what we saw at the time of weaning. As I increase the frequency of the supplementation to their mothers, I increase their weaning weights substantially. Very consistent to the study I showed you before, right? That it seems to maximize calf weaning weights, you really have to supplement. A very consistent program, very consistent nutrition management for those cows. Longer periods, more consistently. Now, and the best frequency, what it is, depends on you, right? Very few people will want to do every day. Right? A lot of people will be able to do 3 times a week. And even though in this study here, 3 times a week and once a week was exactly the same, I would still suggest you to do 3 times a week, especially if you're using supplements that has corn in it. 14 pounds of a supplement that has a high amount of starch will cause problems. 3 times a week, no problem, right? So if you cannot do it 7 days a week, do it 3. If you cannot do it 3, do 2, but no more than that. Once a week is pushing, right? Unless you're using distillers, like I said, or liquid molasses with urea, okay? Now, another way that we thought about, instead of just changing timing and frequency, what if I use the supplementation as a vehicle to boost their growth during gestation and performance of the cow and the calf? So the first study that we did was with monensin. Monensin is ionophore, changes the fermentation pattern in the rumen, right? Increases production of propionate, which is a precursor for glucose. And glucose is the main source of energy for the fetus, right? It also leads to some changes in the physiology of the mother that increases production of some hormones that are good for reproduction. All right, so the idea here was very simple. 70 days before calving, one group did not receive anything. Another group received 2 pounds of distillers every day. or 2 pounds of distillers with 200 milligrams of monensin, which, by the way, would cost you 5 cents a day. Very small amount. And then after that, after calving, everybody's treated exactly the same. So what we saw was, in terms of body condition score, again, everybody starts in good condition. If they don't supplement, you can see a significant body condition score loss before calving. Now, the group that was supplemented, if they had monensin or not, they achieved the same body condition score at the time of calving. Right, so adding the monensin didn't do anything to their body condition score at the time of calving. And then when I look at their pregnancy rates, those that were supplemented, they were extremely, the pregnancy rates was really high compared to those groups that did not receive any supplementation, but no benefit of monensin. So in this case here, what would you do? Monensin is a little bit tricky because you cannot have horses have access to it, right? So you got to be careful with that. So why would you do it if there's no improvement into the cow performance? But when we look at weaning weights, right, it's very consistent. Every time we do this study, we have this kind of response, is that as they are supplemented during the pre-calving period, their calves are heavier at weaning, and the best results if they received the monensin during the pre-calving period, almost 50 pounds more. Right? 5 cents for 70 days, that's $4, and you got 50 pounds more. All right? Now, another strategy that we tried was the use of probiotics. More and more studies are being done in beef cattle using this product. If you're not familiar with it, it's pretty much bacteria, good bacteria for those cows. Right? Some of you probably already also take probiotics on a daily basis. Right? And you guys are going to see these two terms being used a lot, probiotics and direct fat microbials. They are pretty much the same thing, but technically there's some just differences in definition. Right? So every time you see those two terms, they pretty much mean feeding good bacteria to those animals. Now, there are several ways that it can actually help with the performance, and I'm not going to go over all the details. What it does, it pretty much, by providing this good bacteria, you change the fermentation in the rumen, so they digest fiber better, right? So there's an increase in energy intake because of that. But it also has a lot of benefits in terms of intestine function. Decreases pathogen growth, increases competition with bad bacteria. So the good bacteria colonize intestine and help, right, with overall intestinal function. And it also has some benefits to their systemic immune system. Right, so there's a long list of what it does to the animal, and all of that resulting in better either growth, reproduction, or milk production. Right? So what we wanted to do was, what if I use this probiotic during pregnancy with the idea that if I can have better fiber digestibility, right, and increase fiber digestibility, increasing energy intake, overall I'm going to make them gain more body condition score. It's going to benefit the mother and the calf. Right? So this study here was done again in South Florida. It's all Brangus cows on Bahia grass pastures, right, from May all the way until March of the following year. The treatments were, all of them are receiving 2 pounds of soybean hulls during this study, either with or without the probiotics. All right? Those heifers are those heifers are pregnant for the first time, so they still need supplementation to keep growing and having good body condition score and good size. Right? So that's why we're using that long supplementation strategy. Now, that supplementation lasted from the beginning of the late gestation period all the way until the start of the breeding season. And then at the start of the breeding season, we early weaned those calves. They were 3 months of age, right? So we took them from the mothers, and we put the mothers with the bulls. We do it because early weaning on first calf cows significantly increased their pregnancy rates by 30%. 30%. Right? It's a very good strategy to do if you are having problems with first calf cows. And also, it allows me to put the calves in the feedlot, and I can feed them the same diet, and I remove any confounding effects, right? So I know that they are all eating the same thing, the same amount. I can challenge their immune system, right? And so there's no influence of milk production or how much the calf is consuming, right? It's a good model to really push and test these fetal programming ideas, okay? So what we found was that those heifers that received the probiotic supplementation, they gained more body condition score during the pre-calving period. So at the time of calving, they had greater body condition score. Statistically significant, right? But it wasn't that much. It was a touch less than half of a point. After calving, those cows, they significantly lose body condition score. So by the time of the start of the breeding season, that extra body condition score that they had at the time of calving was gone. And this is the main reason why when we look at their reproductive performance, we didn't see any differences in pregnancy rates, calving distribution, or even with birth weights. It did increase by 3 pounds, but it was not statistically significant. It wasn't an issue, right? Those calves were really light, very light at the time of birth. Now, when I look at the calf performance, this is again where we see the results. It seems to be there's a very consistent pattern here you guys see in each one of those studies. Now, at the time of early weaning, there's no differences in their growth, but once we put them in a dry lot and we really push those calves to gain as much as we could so that they can express whatever was imprinted during pregnancy, that's when they start showing differences. Right? So by the end of the fetal period, they were 20 pounds heavier if they were born from cows that received the probiotic. The calves never had access to the probiotic. Right? They never consumed it. So this is just a result of what happened to them when they were in utero. Right? And we also saw that calves born from cows that received supplementation with probiotics, they had better immune function. More calves with greater vaccine response, greater antibody production. So that's what we want, right? Heavier calves that have good health, that will go somewhere else, that the buyers are going to love it. Great strategy for those pregnant cows. Now, what about multiparous cows? What if I want to do it with my mature herd? Right? Nobody is going to supplement that amount of supplement for those mature cows for all year long. So what we did, we tried to use that strategy in the trace mineral salt. Okay, so those cows are receiving the same trace mineral for a whole year, which was added or not with this probiotic. It's just 3 grams. In that study right now, unless they change the cost, it was 4 cents per cow per day. It's nothing. It's less than $10 in the whole year. All right? So remember that. So what we did, we just added to the trace mineral salt or not, and we let them eat as much as they wanted all year long, starting at the time of weaning and then all the way into weaning of the following year. So what we saw in terms of consumption is what you typically see trace mineral consumption throughout the year. Right? As we start the study, they eat a lot, right? But then after that, they regulate, they are meeting their requirements. It fluctuates for a lot of times of the year, especially when you're providing supplementation during the winter time. Right? They forget about the trace mineral salt and they just start consuming the supplement and the hay that was provided. Very common response. But once spring starts and we have some showers, they go back up as you would expect. But overall, what you guys can see is that when you added the probiotic, it actually increased the consumption. There were several weeks that those animals actually consumed more trace minerals. So it's definitely not a concern. Now, when we look at the performance of the cows, we didn't see any effects on their body condition score during the pre-calving period, which is different from what I just showed you with pregnant heifers. But they did gain more body condition score during the breeding season, which was statistically significant but not biologically, right? Because their pregnancy rates was the same whether they received a probiotic or not. Right? And it's common to see that those mature cows sometimes they don't respond to some of those fine adjustments, right? Now, again, when I look at the calf performance, that's where I start seeing the response. And those calves that were born from cows that received the probiotics. Now, in this study, the calves also had access to it, right? So they could lick some of the trace mineral that had the product. At the time of weaning, they are roughly 12 pounds heavier if they were born from cows that had access to the probiotic. So even in mature herds, it still works. 12 pounds right now, it's almost $28, right? A little bit more than that. And it costs less than $10 per cow to do this. So it has a lot of potential for that. We're still running that study. We weaned the calves actually last month, and we're going to follow the heifers now. We're going to develop them and look at their first breeding season to see if there's any long-term carryover effects. Now, having said that, right, what about changing the nutrition of the mother? What does it do to the pregnancy of their daughters? Unfortunately, there's very limited amount of studies looking at that. But the good thing is that whatever the few amount of studies that we do have, at least they have consistent responses. So, and the idea here is pretty much the same. Just like, remember the figure that I showed you, that each organ has different timing of development. Well, reproductive tract pretty much develops all throughout gestation. Okay, so if you change the nutrition during pregnancy, you expect to have some effects in the heifer offspring. So some of the earlier work that was published in the Midwest, in Nebraska, and in Montana, they looked at providing 1 pound of a protein supplement during the last 90 days of gestation. Very small amount, okay? So what they saw was those heifers born from cows that received supplementation, they are heavier at weaning. In one of those studies, they achieved puberty slightly sooner. And in another one, they had significantly increased their pregnancy rates. Right? Also, they significantly increased the percentage of those heifers calving during the first 21 days of the calving season, which, remember Pedro's presentation, that's very important for their longevity. And Dr. Rosasco is going to present more of that data either today or tomorrow. I don't remember in the schedule. All right? Now, another study. This is in, if I'm not wrong, this is in Indiana. They looked at cows that received supplementation with distillers or not. Right? At the time of weaning, heifers born from cows that had access to the distillers, they were 30 pounds heavier at the time of weaning, and that continued all the way into the end of the study. They saw no differences in puberty attainment or even the classification of the follicles, but a significant increase in heifers pregnant by AI if they were born from cows that received supplementation. Right? There's a lot of things that we can still do about that. Unfortunately, very few people are capable of retaining those heifers for such a long time and evaluate that. But at least, this is just 2. We have probably 10. They're very consistent. All right? Now, what I wanted to show you is this preliminary data with the heat stress. Okay? The idea about this study is started because as you drive, right, in the southeast, in Florida, I would say, and even North Carolina, once I was there, you would see a lot of pastures that did not have a shade at all, right, for some time of the year. And the perception in Southeast is that if you have some of the Bos Indicus influence, you don't have to worry about that, right, because they can handle. Well, the Bos Indicus does help with that, and you guys are going to see some more presentation of Dr. Martins tomorrow, how much the Indicus genetics contribute to their response. But that doesn't mean they're bulletproof, right, especially if it's happening on a very critical time. And the idea about this study here was to try to change that perception. And it came also because a lot of studies that were done in Florida, right, with dairy cows, like some work from Dr. Pete Hansen and other faculty at our department, showing that when you have heat stress during gestation of Holstein cows, it's very detrimental to the performance of the offspring. They're lighter at birth, lighter at weaning, they gain less body weight, they have poor immune function, they produce less milk production. They have less milk production the first and last and second lactation. And also there's some data now showing that there's a problem with the F2s. So having heat stress during gestation affects the daughters and the granddaughters. We don't know about that in beef cattle. But 3 years ago, we started this study that was funded by the USDA with that in mind. Does heat stress in beef cattle, even in herds that has Bos Indicus influence, does it help? Or does it make it worse when that heifer that stays at the ranch are also challenged with the same environment? Okay? So what we did here in this study, we used shade as our method to change the heat stress. Everybody was in heat stress. Okay? If you're going to Florida at that time of the year, August to September, you're going to have THI that are above 90 for several hours of the day, like extremely hot. What we did here, we just used shade to change the level of heat stress, right? Too much or not so much. Right? There's not much you can do than that. And it's a very simple way to do it. So they had access to shade or not during late gestation. After calving, from all the calving all the way into weaning, everybody treated exactly the same. Everybody has access to shade. And at the time of weaning in the following year, now the heifers that stay in the herd, half of them received shade or not during the post-weaning phase, right? From July all the way into December when they're synchronized in AI. Okay, so you have all 4 possible combinations. Shade or no shade during gestation, shade or no shade during the post-weaning period. All right, so it's about 180 counts per year, so over 500 counts in that study. We just finished the count part, and now we started at the year 3 of those heifers. So what we saw was what happens to those counts, those Brangus counts in the heat when you remove the shade. And as you would expect, there is a decrease in body condition score. But very minor amount, if you look at there, is less than half of a point. And that decrease did not change their pregnancy rates at all. One thing that we did see is that it did decrease their birth weights, about 1 pound only. So a lot of those differences you can barely notice unless you really collect individual data. And that's why, like, several people have this perception that because they're Bos Indicus, that nothing happens, right? You don't see a dramatic change in their body condition score, or pregnancy rates, or even the birth weights of those calves. However, when we start looking at the calf performance, this is what happened in year 1. Okay, all right? This is body weight at the time during the pre-weaning phase. Now look at the weaning time. calves born from cows that did not have access to shade, they were actually heavier. All right? It actually helped them in that first year. We also did another study at the same time, the same year, with a group of pregnant heifers. Also had no shade or no shade during gestation, and we got the same response. It's the same research experiment station, different pastures, different, right, but the same herd, and we got the same response. Right, when they experienced heat stress during gestation, actually helped them. So we were pretty excited about that, but thank God we did it for another 2 years, because when you look at the other 2 years, it changed. Now, for the next 2 years, those calves that were born from cows that did not have access to shade, they're the lightest group. Right? And this is something that you guys need to remember when you're reading about fetal programming studies. If it has only 1 year data, be a little bit skeptical, right? Because sometimes it doesn't replicate. Okay, there's a lot of counts. This is not just random. Now we don't see, like when I look at the temperature, this is the average THI of the center for the whole year. This is the maximum THI that we see and the minimum of that day. You don't see anything striking, right, that you can say, all right, in year 1 it was significantly cooler or hotter than other years. So we're still trying to find out what's going on here. One thing that we did notice is in year 1, there were more events of rainfall at the end of the day. So it seems that those cows that had more opportunities to cool off at the end of the afternoon. Right? We don't know if that's the real cause, but that's the one thing that we noticed. We collect the muscle samples, the blood sample from cows, the calves, and we're going to look at gene expression, trying to figure out what's going on in here. But at least, right, I just wanted to show you what happened so far. Now, the most important data is this one here, their reproduction. This is the first 2 years reproduction of their heifers. And the response was very consistent. So forget about what happened to their body weights at the time of weaning, right? The heat stress during gestation had consistent negative impacts on their heifer offspring in the first 2 years. So heifers born from cows that did not have access to shade, they had the same amount of heifers pubertal at the start of synchronization. No differences in their reproductive tract score, but look at that. If they were born from cows that had no shade, half of those heifers showed estrus, right? And significantly lower time pregnancy rates. And if you are familiar with some of the struggles that people have with Bosinico's influence herds when you're synchronizing, you're using protocols, that's very common to see. Some years they have only 29%. Some years they're pretty good, they're 50%. Even though the cow's in good condition, the protocol worked, everything is being done correctly. And I think that it could probably be the reason. There are several pastures, just because fencing I set based on a road, right, or on a creek or whatever, was never really done thinking about let's make sure that every pasture has the same amount of shade. Right? So it is bad for the reproduction. Right? We have a lot more data than this. I just want to show you the main ones so you guys have that in the back of your mind. Right? And a lot of this response, we still don't know what's going on. But at least this is novel, never done before, so we're pretty excited with the results that we got. Okay? Now, final messages. The main thing I wanted to remember is that think about how you change the diet of your cow, not just in terms of how it's going to affect the reproduction, but also think about that calf, right? The quality of that calf. Right? We have to consider both of them. This is a great opportunity for a cow-calf producer. You guys can drive the quality of those calves. And you guys have another tool, perhaps, to change the nutrition during pregnancy according to your needs. You don't necessarily have to focus just on reproduction. Right? And it seems that there are some final adjustments that you can do to help your operation. Right? So, for example, if you want to maximize unit weights, make sure you supplement for a longer period, as consistent as you can. Right? And some of the feed additives have been working very well. Right? And lastly, again, just keep that in mind with the heat stress. As we start doing more studies, and other studies are going to be done in other locations, I think it's something we should definitely think about. Even though they might handle the heat, as you would expect, when it's happening during pregnancy, it does affect how the calf develops. Right? Calf, as a fetus, doesn't have the capacity to regulate their body temperature. So the body temperature is driven by how the mother body temperature is happening. All right? So with that, I would like to thank you again for being here, and I'll take any questions.
All right. Let's thank Dr. Moriel. We have time for one question.
On your talking about feeding 3 times a week. Does it matter whether it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday? Can it be Friday, Saturday, Sunday? What does that matter?
We have not done anything looking at that changing, right? I would keep at least a day. The whole idea is about keeping it consistent. Because if you feed 3 days in a row, right, and then you're going to have 4 days that without anything. So it's going to have too much of this fluctuation on their nutrient status. So I would try to spread them as much as you can.
Thinking of folks that like work through the week and
Yeah.
the weekend warriors, whatever.
Now, this is a guess. I don't know what's going on because I never tried that. I think it would still be better than not doing it. But there's no data to show if that, what you're saying is going to happen or not. Something to try, but you're going to have a control group to do something like that. The whole idea is just avoid fluctuations in their intake as much as you can so that it benefits the calf. All right?
All right, let's thank Dr. Moriel again.